We're starting to get data in now from interviewing conducted after Sunday's announcement by President Obama of the military action that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden in Pakistan. Let's look at some of the numbers. First of all, near unanimous approval, overall approval for the actions that resulted in the killing of Osama bin Laden. 93% approval, 5% disapprove. This is unusual. I've been looking at public opinion data for many years now, and it is rare indeed to find 9 out of 10 Americans who agree with anything. Last time we had this type of strong support was way back in 2001, in October of that year, October 7 to be specific, when we asked Americans whether they approved or disapproved of President George W. Bush's decision to send troops into Afghanistan, again, just a little more than a month after 9/11, and at that point, 90% of Americans approved. So we have, and there's a connection here, of course, we have the same level of very high approval for the actions that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden. Now, let's look at a question we ask Americans. How much credit do you give for the military action to, and we gave Americans a list of 4 individuals and entities: the President, President Obama, former President George W. Bush, the CIA, and the U.S. military. Well, and perhaps this doesn't come as a surprise, by far the most credit goes to the U.S. military. A very high percent, 89% as a matter of fact, of Americans say they give a great deal of credit for the mission in Pakistan that resulted in the death of Osama bin Laden to the U.S. military. Next in line is the CIA, with 62% of Americans saying they give a great deal of credit to the CIA. And then comes President Obama. 35% of Americans say they give a great deal of credit to President Obama. Now, to be sure, another 30% say they give a moderate amount of credit, but notice the big gulf there. Americans much more likely to be positive about crediting the CIA and the military than President Obama. There has been a lot of discussion about the groundwork for this mission that was laid by the Bush administration. And some people, Republicans, have argued that George W. Bush should get some credit for what happened, the death of bin Laden. Well, as I mentioned, we included him in the list. He's below Obama. 22% of Americans say that George Bush deserves a great deal of credit for the death of bin Laden. So the former president, who's now living in Texas, of course, does get some credit, but not as much as the current president. One side note here, the U.S. military has more confidence from Americans than any other institution we test. That's been true for a number of years now, and these data certainly suggest that the successful mission against bin Laden will do nothing but enhance the image of the U.S. military in the eyes of the average American. That's an update for you on Americans' reactions to the events of this past weekend. I'm Dr. Frank Newport, Gallup's Editor-in-Chief.